Hi, welcome to the 2021 North Carolina Beginning Teacher Summit. My name is Kaylin Perry, and my session is Key to Classroom Management, Cultivating a Community of Kindness and Respect. And I'm so glad that you chose to join me. My hope for this session is that it will give you lots of practical tips and tricks that you can take into your classroom this year. And most importantly, that you'll be able to leave with a toolkit of teacher resources that will really help you thrive in your first year or one of your first 3 years of teaching. So just welcome. I chose this quote because it's a quote that I really believe in and that has encouraged me as I've entered the teaching profession. It says, "Teaching is the greatest form of optimism," by Colleen Wilcox. And I think this is just so true. When we choose to be teachers, it comes from a belief that we can impact the future and that the future is going to be really great. And so I hope that you are entering this profession or you are continuing your journey on this profession with a lot of optimism and excitement, because it really is the greatest profession in the world, and there is so much impact that we can make on our students. So the session description, I chose this quote as well because I really feel like it sums up why I wanted to become a teacher, which is to care about my students and to make them feel loved. And so Gordon Newfield said it best when he asserted that kids learn best when they like their teacher and when they think their teacher likes them. So classroom management presents lots of challenges for novice and experienced teachers alike, but when we view our students as partners in the learning process and work to cultivate a community built on respect and kindness, everyone wins. In this session, I'm going to share with you tips and tricks on how to start out your year right, talk through various community building strategies and lessons, as well as hear from students who are going to share their experiences about which classroom environments enable them to learn best. So first, this is an amazing TED Talk. I show my kids TED Talks all the time because I just think that they are so wonderful. But I'm going to show you guys this from Rita Pierson. It's titled "Every Kid Needs a Champion."
I have spent my entire life either at the schoolhouse, on the way to the schoolhouse, or talking about what happens in the schoolhouse. Both my parents were educators. My maternal grandparents were educators. And for the past 40 years, I've done the same thing. And so, needless to say, over those years, I've had a chance to look at education reform from a lot of perspectives. Some of those reforms have been good, some of them have been not so good. And we know why kids drop out. We know why kids don't learn. It's either poverty, low attendance, negative peer influences. We know why. But one of the things that we never discuss, or we rarely discuss, is the value and importance of human connection, relationships. James Comer says that no significant learning can occur without a significant relationship. George Washington Carver says all learning is understanding relationships. Everyone in this room has been affected by a teacher or an adult. For years, I have watched people teach. I have looked at the best and I've looked at some of the worst. A colleague said to me one time, "They don't pay me to like the kids. They pay me to teach a lesson. The kids should learn it. I should teach it. They should learn it. Case closed." Well, I said to her, "You know, kids don't learn from people they don't like." She said, "That's just a bunch of hooey." And I said to her, "Well, your year is going to be long and arduous, dear." Needless to say, it was. Some people think that you can either have it in you to build a relationship or you don't. I think Stephen Covey had the right idea. He said you ought to just throw in a few simple things, like seeking first to understand as opposed to being understood. Simple things like apologizing. You ever thought about that? Tell a kid you're sorry, they're in shock. I taught a lesson once on ratios. I'm not real good with math, but I was working on it. And I got back and looked at that teacher edition. I taught the whole lesson wrong. So I came back to class the next day and I said, look, guys, I need to apologize. I taught the whole lesson wrong. I'm so sorry. I said, that's okay, Miss Pearson. You were so excited. We just let you go. I have had classes that were so low, so academically deficient that I cried. I wondered, how am I going to take this group in 9 months from where they are to where they need to be? And it was difficult. It was awfully hard. How do I raise the self-esteem of a child and his academic achievement at the same time? One year I came up with a bright idea. I told all my students, you were chosen to be in my class. Because I am the best teacher and you are the best students, they put us all together so we could show everybody else how to do it. One of the students said, really? I said, really? We have to show the other classes how to do it. So when we walk down the hall, people will notice us. So you can't make noise, you just have to strut. And I gave him a saying to say, I am somebody. I was somebody when I came. I'll be a better somebody when I leave. I am powerful and I am strong. I deserve the education that I get here. I have things to do, people to impress, and places to go. And they said, yeah. You say it long enough, it starts to be a part of you. And so, I gave a quiz, 20 questions. Student missed 18. I put a +2 on this paper and a big smiley face. He said, Miss Pearson, is this an F? I said, yes. He said, then why'd you put a smiley face? I said, because you on the roll. You got 2 right, you didn't miss them all. I said, and when we review this, won't you do better? He said, yes, ma'am, I can do better. You see, -18 sucks all the life out of you. +2 said, I ain't all bad. For years, I watched my mother take the time at recess to review, go on home visits in the afternoon, buy combs and brushes and peanut butter and crackers to put in her desk drawer for kids that needed to eat, and a washcloth and some soap for the kids who didn't smell so good. See, it's hard to teach kids who stink. And kids can be cruel. And so she kept those things in her desk, and years later, after she retired, I watched some of those same kids come through and say to her, you know, Miss Walker, you made a difference in my life. You made it work for me. You made me feel like I was somebody when I knew at the bottom I wasn't. And I want you to just see what I've become. And when my mama died 2 years ago at 92, there were so many former students at her funeral. It brought tears to my eyes, not because she was gone, but because she left a legacy of relationships that could never disappear. Can we stand to have more relationships? Absolutely. Will you like all your children? Of course not. And you know your toughest kids are never absent. Never. You won't like them all, and the tough ones show up for a reason. It's the connection, it's the relationships. And while you won't like them all, the key is they can never, ever know it. So teachers become great actors and great actresses, and we come to work when we don't feel like it, and we listen to policy that doesn't make sense, and we teach anyway. We teach anyway because that's what we do. Teaching and learning should bring joy. How powerful would our world be if we had kids who were not afraid to take risks, who were not afraid to think, and who had a champion? Every child deserves a champion, an adult who will never give up on them, who understands the power of connection and insists that they become the best that they can possibly be. Is this job tough? You betcha. Oh God, you betcha. but it is not impossible. We can do this. We're educators. We're born to make a difference. Thank you so much.
So 7 tips or takeaways that I personally got from being a champion for your children, or every child needs a champion, the TED Talk. First is build the relationship. And so just taking the time to get to know their name, to listening to their story, to just showing them that you're interested in them, that you care about them, breaking their single story. I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit later about a activity that I do at the beginning of every single semester. It's called The Danger of a Single Story. And this is just so crucial. Every kid enters your classroom with a single story that the world sees them, whether we all are, have these stereotypes about children based on their previous academic record, their race, ethnicity, gender identity. So much of who they are can be seen through a single lens if we're not careful. And so we have to break their single story. We're all, as educators, guilty of, I know I am, of going to other teachers and saying, hey, I've got this person, I see their name on my roster, and I've seen their name on the discipline list, and I'm a little bit worried about them. And I just encourage you to resist the urge to do that, or if you must, fight against that single story, because every kid is different in every classroom, and the culture that you create in your classroom is so different than another teacher. And who knows, they're going to have a completely different relationship with you. And so it's not fair to start the semester with predispositions about them. Let every semester be fresh, a fresh start. Every day is a new day. And then if they surprise you, if they end up doing amazing in your class, go and change the narrative with others. Share your experience with this student, this trouble student. Share it with their teachers and give them a new story, a story that has hope and allows teachers to be excited to have them. Make every step a learning opportunity. So even though, I've had kids that when I saw their name on my roster, I was like, oh Lord, what am I going to do with this kid? But they would surprise me and they would be great, but they had their bad days. We all do. I know I have days when I'm not as at the top of my peak performance, and so make every step a learning opportunity. And this means admitting when you're kind of down or when you're having an off day, and accepting when they do as well, and just making it a learning lesson, saying, hey, it's okay that you're not really into it today, you're not feeling it, but what can we do to make sure that you get this done? What can we do to make sure that you're completing this assignment to the best of your ability? How can I assist you? And if they are, have a bad attitude or they're disrespectful, having that conversation and turning it into a positive instead of leaving it at a negative. And then being patient and touching base. I think this is really important. So not just letting, not getting so frustrated when they do have a bad day, realizing that change happens over time, and that, like I said before, we're constantly growing. And so just touching base with them. How are you doing? How's your home life? How's your sporting event going? What can I do to serve you better? How can I meet your needs? Kids really appreciate that. They see that effort, and it encourages them, and it strengthens their relationship with you. Finally, the last 2, self-affirmation. So many kids that come into my class that have a hard time at first. It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You'll see that a lot of times those kids that have been labeled as troubled kids, or kids that are going to cause problems for you, it's because their whole life they've been labeled that way, and they've been told, whether it be by a parent or a teacher or a coach, that they weren't good enough, or their confidence has been beat down. And so just building kids up. It is amazing when you tell kids, this is my best class. I love this class, or I enjoy when y'all walk in the door every day. I'm so excited because I get to see you. And when they sense that is genuine, that you really mean it, they just thrive. And so you can take some really low kids and bring them higher than you ever thought possible, just by encouraging them and helping them believe in themselves. And then lastly is reflecting. And so I think, and I kind of touched on this with the touch and base, but just meeting with kids one-on-one and saying, hey, what is your goal for this semester? Where do you want to be? What is your ideal grade that you'd like to leave this class with? What do you want to make sure that you improve on, whether it be your writing or your testing or projects or group work? What can you grow in? And then at the end of the semester, going back and looking at those goals and saying, hey, how much progress have we made? Did you accomplish your goals? If not, why not? I think kids really appreciate that effort, and it shows them that you are listening to them, that you hear what they want to accomplish, and it makes them want to work for that. And there's that accountability piece as well. So all right, so I'm so excited about this. I interviewed some of the expert teachers and students from my school, some of the top echelon of teachers and students at Croatan High School, and I've put together this 20-minute video. I know 20 minutes sounds a little long, but I think it's worth your time. They have such amazing perspectives, and I learn so much from them every day, and I just thought I would be remiss if I didn't show it to you. So I'm going to play this video, and then I'm going to break down each of kind of the points that I want to hit for you as a beginning teacher, and some of the keys that I think are important for you to find success this year. So I'm going to go ahead and start that, and then we'll talk through it.
To create culture in my classrooms, I think a lot of times we think about making relationships with students, these big plans, and we have to have like the perfect lesson and things to do that. But I think it's something as simple as like just standing at your classroom door and saying hello and just saying their name every day. I didn't realize that meant so much to students at one time, and I kind of got tired of doing it, so I didn't do it for a week or so. And then they told me, they're like, why aren't you saying hey to us at the door? I said, okay, I'll start again. And later when they were talking about me for something or another, I can't remember what it was, they were like, he even says like hey to us every day. And I was like, did that make a difference? And I guess it does, like something as little as that. And just making them feel seen. I teach music, so I try to pick like my repertoire based on all the different cultures that are always in my classroom. Like we'll sing in different languages. Also just making my students feel seen in the classroom. Like for example, like the posters I hang, we have solfege hand signs, and like we have multicultural hand signs because not all my kids are white. So I want every nationality to be able to be seen in my classroom, on the walls, in our music, and basically through everything. So that's a little bit of how I do that. I'm just discussing like empathy and how we feel towards other people. Just taking a few moments to reflect with your class about that is so powerful. Not even about a certain topic, but just about empathy in general, and understanding each other, and understanding that we're all going through different things, no matter how big or small they seem to each person.
So last year when I was in Miss Perry's class, we were able to express our opinions and like our views on certain topics. And as you get older, you kind of realize that like you have to express those things, and you can kind of have your own opinions on certain like issues or political views and stuff like that. But when you're younger, you don't really realize like the significance of it and like what people, or like what you truly believe. You kind of just listen to your parents or like what your like best friend believes or something like that. But I just felt as the activities we did in class, like we were able to like go from side to side and express our actual feelings and like talk to others about it, and not get shut down by people saying like, oh, that's wrong, or like your opinion doesn't matter. It was definitely good. We were able to share our thoughts and our opinions in that class, because you don't normally get that.
The thing is, Kaylin, is to really know your students when they first come in the door. When I went through college, we were always stressed to start out tough, because you can always ease up. Start out tough, you can always ease up. And that was repeated to us. And I think there is a place for that. But I think somewhere in that mix that was lost, because if you connect with your kids, they will behave. So if you get to know them from day one and look them in the eye and call out their names and learn their names. I make a seating chart on the first day so that they don't realize I still refer to that seating chart. I mean, I'm terrible with names now, as old as I am, and I have that seating chart up there. And if it slips my mind, I know sitting in that desk is Kaylin. And look those kids in the eye, call them by their name. And often teachers will say, you need to go to their events, go to their events. But beginning teachers have a lot on their plates. They really do. And we get involved in committees and different things like that. Coaching, you don't have time. But it's important, if you know that kid is playing tonight, say to that kid, good luck tonight. You know, I hope you do well. And check up on them. Hey, how'd the game go yesterday? Something else I do early on is have my students, I started doing this a few years ago, have my students write a letter to me. And I give them an example, and it's a letter to them telling them about myself and some interests that I have. And they open up. And I have followed up on things and found kids who needed help from social services through just that simple letter. And I have followed them all semester long and gotten them the help that they needed. And now it's interesting to see them now at the end of the semester and at the beginning when they wouldn't say a word. And they would connect, and they'll tell you things in writing that they may not ever say to another living soul. And just doing that, that helps them to open up and connect with you as a teacher. And then that establishes that, you know what, this teacher's not going to yell at me if I get something wrong. That teacher cares about me. And I think it's worth those early lessons in doing that.
So another thing that's really helped, I feel like, just grow as a student at school is my civics teacher last year. She allowed us to kind of start the student-run Young Democrats Club at our school. And we live in a pretty conservative area where a lot of kids, like most kids aren't Democrats, but it allowed us to kind of like express our opinions and create this sense of community that we didn't have before. And now the club has grown, so there's over like 40 members. It's one of the biggest clubs at our school just because of that sense of community, even though it's not like most kids at our school don't agree with us. And I think that's like kind of helped, especially for new students that have come this year who agree with us from different areas of the country, to just like feel more welcome. And it's created like this really good sense of belonging, especially during the pandemic when everyone's like distanced all the time and like it's harder to talk to people, like everyone's far apart in classes and you have your mask, but you're able to like meet every week with students and discuss ideas and like come up with projects together with something that you really like. And I just think like having a teacher that supports that just makes your learning environment so much better and like more like creates a better sense of belonging.
One kid wrote, you wouldn't let us go down. We were always fighting to go up, which I thought was kind of cool because I kept pushing them like, no, don't give me this. Give me excellence. And they did say that I preached that to the class, that I expect excellence. You didn't wake up looking in the mirror thinking I want to be average today. And so they heard that from me a lot. They said that my assignments were meant to push them out of their comfort zone. But they said I did a lot of case studies in labs where they could work with their classmates, and that made the learning less arduous. So I think they liked the teamwork. But I think they also, coming from this, they said that the feedback I got from them was that, yeah, the rigor was there, but I put them in an environment where they felt safe or comfortable working with their peers.
I think the first thing that really helps me in learning as a student was last year in AP Earth and Environmental. My teacher, she put us all in this class. We were all freshmen, so she wanted to like create this sense of community where we were all like the top in our class at science, but in order to make it feel like no one was competing with each other and trying to be the best, she put us in groups for every single assignment we did, like purposely putting kids where like, let's say if I was like better at climate change, we're talking about that, and I had a friend who was worse at that subject, then we'd be put together for that thing instead to like talk and discuss and get our ideas across. And it like just helped to like ground you so you don't become like cocky, because like everyone has their strengths and weaknesses, and it just helped to like really understand how other people were processing information that you might not be as good at like processing on your own. So I really liked that last year in my science class.
And I think the consistent feedback I got from my students is the reason that they understood my expectations and what I thought was excellence was I gave feedback, constant feedback. And I'm kind of impressed that they actually went back into Canvas and read everything I wrote. I think that's one thing that I always tell my kids is if you're going to take the time to do the assignment, I'm going to take the time to read every single word you write. So if you're writing garbage, I'm going to call you on it. Yeah. And so when I would give them feedback, not only would I say, I wouldn't say this is garbage, I would say this is how I would change it. And I would give them an explicit answer, like how I would answer this question. Or if they were working on a project or a case study and they were kind of analyzing a problem and it was way off in left field and made up stupid stuff, I would kind of bring them back to it. I say, I think you got a little off topic here. Go back and look at the prompt. This is how I would answer this question. And then I would write out my response so they could see, oh, this is what she expected.
I loved her class because on all of our writing pieces, she leaves lengthy comments and often like voice notes describing it, so you can like hear her thought process as she's going through your writing instead of just telling you that your writing is wrong. So it helps you, so then you get a better grade on your next writing assignment, which is really nice.
Always over prepared, and I always knew way too much information about what they were asking. So as a new teacher, that's hard to have. I think it's like a growing experience. They ask you crazy questions and you learn, you go home and Google. I mean, my first year that I was here for teaching AP, I don't think there was a night I didn't go to bed before 2 a.m. because I just kept anticipating, what are they going to ask me about this? Oh my gosh, I need to know all about that. And I was living day by day by day, just making sure. And it didn't help that I had these extremely bright kids who were going to scare me to death. But yeah, I always had to make sure that I knew everything they could possibly ask me. It was just a lot of work up front.
Create a classroom where kids want to come in, they feel it's fair in my classroom, and they feel that they're liked, they're valued, that I care about them, and I do that by talking with them, getting to know them, their interests. I think there's mistakes that young teachers make. I know I made them. Everybody makes them. And sometimes you make them without even realizing. I think that's kind of the trick. You don't realize you're being unfair to students, or they start to pick up and go, oh, does she have favorites? Or having a favorite in the class, or the perception that you have favorites in the class, can undermine your classroom environment like that, because then other students are going to feel less valued, that just because they don't fit that favorite, whatever that person is, that then they're less and they don't fit, and then they'll stop trying to fit, and it ruins their motivation to come to class or their want to. And so I think that really plays into fairness. Another way that plays into fairness that young teachers will make a mistake on, maybe even older teachers, is grading. Is that if you have clear rubrics or guidelines for grading and you're consistent across the board, then when kids talk, hey, how did she grade number 2 for you? They're always seeing that consistency and fairness, and therefore then there's no favorites. Yeah. See, and that's that everyone's getting a fair shake, and that if you make a mistake in that grading of a rubric, we're all human, that you say, oh, I made a mistake, and fix their grade. Sometimes young teachers will argue with dig in, no, I'm right. No, it's not about being right. Yeah. Follow through. Always make sure that you do not make promises to kids that you can't keep. And make sure that when you do say, I'm going to do the following, that you do it, that you follow through. It builds trust. So it's trust and fairness, expectations are clear. Yeah. And then, just telling a student, I'm really happy to see you today. Yeah. Or focusing every other day, making sure that you're getting to each one of them.
I hope that that was as informative and helpful to you as it was to me. I really enjoyed interviewing them and filming them. I think I grew as a professional through my conversations with these amazing teachers and students. So now
to create culture.
Now I'm going to get right into it. So I will hopefully be able to kind of walk you through my thoughts of the key points that beginning teachers need to keep in mind as they are entering next school year, or as you are entering next school year, and as you are setting those classroom expectations and procedures come August. So first is building classroom culture. And I do want to make sure you know I use the distance learning playbook. It actually looks like this. I'll show you. Oops. And this is an amazing resource. Our school got this for us, and I'm so glad they did. I feel like I learned so much by reading this book. And so I encourage you, if you find this helpful, just the few points that I took from this book, that you get a copy yourself and read it. It's really amazing. So it's more than just distance learning. So the first thing that they talk about in the distance learning playbook is the importance of teacher credibility. And so it's just really important that you know how integral it is that your students view you as credible. And there's a lot of ways that we establish credibility, and I'm going to break those down. But the reason it's so important is because when students don't perceive their teacher as credible, they fail to log in, they fail to complete a task, they don't engage with their peers in the class, and just to put it simply, they fail. And so it's really important they see you as a credible, knowledgeable source for them. And so you need to be seen as believable, convincing, and capable of persuading students that they can be successful in your class. So some really important building blocks to establishing what I call your teacher cred. It may seem simple, but we have witnessed a decrease in trust of students. Or we have witnessed a decrease in the trust students have in their teachers when they see them as unreliable. So first, for building your teacher cred is trust. Students need to know that their teachers really care about them as individuals, and that we have not only their best academic interest at heart, but also their best social interest at heart. That we care about them as a whole person, that they're not just a number, they're not just a body in a desk in our room, but that rather that they are an important member of our class community. And they also, a big part of trust and building trust with your students is that students want to know that their teachers are true to their word and reliable. And that goes back to in the video what Amy said about don't make promises you can't keep. And if for some reason there is a situation where you just can't keep your word, pull that student aside and explain it to them. Think about your students are humans. They're just like you. And when someone lets you down, you feel a natural desire to have an explanation. And so I think it's really important that we treat them with the same dignity and respect that we want. And when I screw up or when I mess up, when I let my students down, I make a personal touch, a personal connection with them and say, hey, I'm really sorry. I know I promised you that I was going to come to your game last night, but something crazy happened and I just couldn't make it. And they really appreciate that. The next is dynamism, and this is part of establishing your credibility, which is communicating your enthusiasm for your subject and for your students. Additionally, it's about creating lessons that are going to capture your students' attention, that are going to be relevant and interesting and engaging. And this is a really important part. Being dynamic is a big part of being a good teacher. No one wants to listen to somebody that's monotone and boring, and I don't want to sit through professional development and have someone come in and who doesn't act like they really want to be there. And so your students need to be confident that you love your subject, that you're excited to be there, and that you love them and you're excited about them. Last is immediacy. And this is, I think, really important because we call it, in a lot of times in teaching, we call it with itness. This idea that your students know that you are aware of what's going on in the classroom, that you are available to them, that you're not just tuned out responding to emails while you're in your class, that you're circulating the room, that you're close to them, that you're near if they have a question, and that they feel like you want to answer their questions, that when they ask you something, you don't dismiss them, or you're not annoyed by their inquiry, that you're actually excited because it engages you with them. So just that you are accessible is a huge part of your teacher credibility. So the first one, I want to dig a little deeper in there. The first is building trust. So 4 keys to trust building. First, promises. If you make a promise, work to keep it or explain why you can't. Second, don't lie. So tell the students the truth about their performance. This is one I really struggled with as a beginning teacher. And I think because I didn't want to hurt their feelings. And so when they weren't good, or when they didn't produce the work that I thought they were able to, when they produced work at a level that was lower than their ability, a lot of times to make them feel better, I would be like, well, it's pretty good. And they know when we're lying. They know that when their work is below standard, below the standard that they can achieve, and they wonder why we're lying to them. And so part of loving students well and building that trust is letting them know, like, hey, I want you to do that again, because it isn't to your ability level. I know you can do better. And they respond well to that. Next is seeing the good. So don't spend all of your time. Behavioral management's really tough those first few years. I can speak for myself. I had a few classes that really tested me. But don't spend all of your time trying to catch them in the wrong, trying to find something to send them out for. At least in my school, we can send them out to ALC if they aren't doing what we want them to. But rather, really try to see the good in what they're doing, praise them when they do things well, and then be honest when their behavior impacts you or the class. So for instance, recently this year, I had a student who in front of other adults was really disrespectful to me. And I pulled him aside. It was during a pep rally, and I asked him to do something, and he challenged me. And I pulled him aside before he went back in the room, and I said, hey, why are you acting like this? And of course, he, at first it's like what? I was like, you just treated me. I said, it made me feel really disrespected, and it really hurt my feelings. And I feel like I'm really good to you, and I didn't feel like I deserved that. And he just looked down. He said, Miss Perry, I'm so sorry. I was just joking. I didn't mean to be disrespectful. And then we moved on, and the next day was a new day. And so I think just being honest about how their behavior impacts you, and once you've established that trust in that relationship, if you can make it a human thing where it's like, I'm a human too, and when you act that way, it hurts me. They really, I think, respect that. And then lastly, introspection. So examine any negative feelings that you have about specific students, and then try to work through those feelings, because you do not want students to feel like you don't like them. That is a huge it breaks trust. When a student can perceive, and they are really good at reading us, when they can perceive that we don't like them, it hinders their learning so much. All right, the next is dynamism. This is 3 ways to improving this key component to classroom management and kind of becoming the best teacher you can be. First is passion. So rekindle your passion for your content. And this is, think about, why did you choose to become a science teacher or a math teacher or an elementary school teacher? What was it about the content that you're teaching them that got you interested in the first place? And so students notice when we're bored by the content, and it gives them an excuse to be disengaged. When we're like, yeah, today I'm teaching you about the naturalization process, and I don't really like it, but I have to teach it. They're like, well, if she doesn't like it, I'm not going to like it either. So just making sure that, even if it isn't your favorite topic, that you are enthusiastic about it. Relevance. So consider the relevance of your lesson. And I know I'm speaking as a social studies teacher. It's a lot easier for me to make my lessons relevant than some other topics or subjects. But I think every subject can be made relevant if we work hard enough. And that is so important, because especially for our low-level learners, when you make it practical and relevant to their lives and they can see how it matters, buy-in increases exponentially. And so really trying to make it, how does the content lend itself to application outside of the classroom? How can we take this and make it work in your life? And then feedback. So seek feedback. And this is what Patricia talked about in the video, where her students really appreciated the fact that she took the time to give good feedback. And so this is for our students and then also for ourselves. So for our students, make sure that you're giving good feedback, and then to create, and build trust and dynamism. And then also with your colleagues. My next door neighbor is Amy, and she is amazing. I can always count on her to be honest with me. If I'm creating a lesson and I'm missing something or it's just not quality, I can count on her to be honest with me. And sometimes it's hard to take that criticism, but having a colleague or a peer that you really admire and respect their teaching practice come in and sit in your classroom or look over your lessons and give you real feedback is invaluable. It's going to make you so much better for your students. Last but not least is immediacy. So big components to immediacy is personal connection. So get to know something personal about each student, and making that connection. It's going to make them feel like you care and that you are interested in them, and they're going to buy into your class a lot more. Learning matters. So teach with urgency, not to the point where it stresses them out, but rather just to the point where they can tell that you feel like what you're teaching them matters. And so students want to know that what they're learning matters and that you're not wasting their time. So you don't waste class time. Don't make them feel like that you are kind of lackadaisical with your planning. Come to class prepared. And this kind of leads me to my next point, teaching bell to bell. I think this is kind of a philosophy that we have at my high school, that you should teach from bell to bell, and that you're going to get the most out of your students if you're well planned. And at the beginning, I'll be honest, as a first year teacher, that meant a lot of days I didn't get to everything because I over planned, because I'd rather run out of time than have idle time, because idle time at the end of class sends the message to kids that their learning doesn't matter. And so make sure that, there are tasks that students can complete while you engage in routine tasks like attendance, or if you need to call the office or something, make sure that they have like a bell ringer or something to start class with. All right. So teacher-student relationships, positive relationships are built on trust. People learn better when they have a positive relationship with the person providing instruction. The evidence of the influence of student-teacher relationship is a positive one with an effect size of 0.48. And so what that generally speaking, just know that when your students feel like you are interested in them and you like them, that they are going to engage more with your content and learn better. So technique 1 is for building a classroom community, is that communication is key. And so this means that when a student makes a mistake, or when you make a mistake, that you communicate quickly and efficiently. And so strong student-teacher relationships rely on effective communication and a willingness to address issues that strain the relationship quickly. And so, excuse me, this is kind of my advice. Be quick, be concise, and be consistent. So be quick, address the problem quickly. Don't let it go on for too long, because then it leaves students to wonder, if it's a problem, why didn't you talk to me about it 3 times ago when I've been doing this all week? Be concise. You don't need to go into a long monologue with students with discipline. They're going to tune you out. So just very quickly state with minimal kind of attitude, just say, hey, I don't like that you're doing this and I want it to stop. And be very clear, like, this is the thing I don't like and this is the behavior that I expect from now on. And then lastly, be consistent. If we all have students that our personalities get along with better than others, and it doesn't matter if it's the kid that is always on task or the kid that's never on task. If they're doing the same behavior, you have to discipline them the same way. So make sure that you are being consistent, because like I said, students are always watching. And if they see that you treat Sarah different than Johnny, because Johnny constantly gets on your nerves, they're watching that, and it takes away from your credibility. Technique 2. So this kind of goes with technique 1, but apologize or discipline and move on. So relationships are not destroyed when problematic behavior occurs. But we have to develop a positive, trusting relationship with each student, and that is built through disciplining quickly and then moving on, and knowing that every day is a new day. Kids, I feel like in my experience, students really struggle when they feel like that their teacher, it's a natural thing I hear with students say a lot, like, oh, so-and-so hates me. This teacher hates me. And I'm like, why do you feel that way? And they're like, because she sent me out, or because she yelled at me yesterday. And I'm like, no, she doesn't dislike you. She's probably forgotten about that. And so that's just natural that kids feel like when they get disciplined, they don't like it and it makes them feel bad inside. And so they're going to naturally be a little defensive afterwards. But if you treat them the next day or even the next minute like everyone else, you just go back to normal and move on, they're going to learn that you are not mad at them. You just didn't like their behavior. And that is a huge trust builder for students. Once they see that there is a distinction between who they are as a person and how they act, I think that is a big step towards a successful classroom. Technique 3, so accountability and fairness. Positive relationships are fostered and maintained when teachers set fair expectations, involve students in determining aspects of the classroom organization and management, and hold students accountable. So just making sure that give them some freedom to tell you. Every year when I establish my classroom rules, I tell them, like, look, these are the things that are important to me. These are the things that bother me when students do them. And what are some things that bother you when other students do them? Or what are some things that bother you when other teachers do them and that you've had in the past? And I tell them, of course, no names. But just having them be part of the conversation, I think, really helps buy-in. And they're going to be more willing to follow your rules when they have some vested stake in it. And then being fair. So kind of already touched on that, but just making sure that you are even across the board, that everyone's held to the same standard. All right, last one. Technique 4, every day is a new day. So it is hard to develop positive relationships and then achieve when you are not wanted. Being disliked by the teacher or peers has a negative influence on learning with an effect size of negative 0.19. In fact, it is one of the few of over 250 influences on learning that actually reverses learning. So not being liked by your teacher not only prevents you from growing, but it actually causes students to go backwards in their learning. So it's so important that we treat all students fairly, and that every day is a new day, a fresh start, and that even if they drive you up the wall, that you don't let them know it. And so I love this quote. I want to draw attention to right here. It says, students who are loved at home come to school to learn, and students who aren't come to school to be loved. And I think this gave me a lot more compassion and grace for my students, because I realized the most challenging students are the ones that need love the most. The ones that are the hardest to love, that make you just want to pull your hair out. They're the ones that they come to school and maybe they just have it really tough at home, and they just need someone to believe in them. They just need someone to build them up, even when they're being terrible, even when they are rude or disrespectful or disruptive. They just want someone to believe in them. And so fighting the urge to get mad and focusing on the good. Last thing, and we'll move on. Peer-to-peer relationships. So classroom community building starts with you, the teacher. Teacher to student relationships influence peer perceptions of classmates. I never realized this until recently, how I treat others, how I treat my students, models for them how they can treat each other. What is the acceptable behavior in this classroom? And it starts with me. And so I've noticed that my students, I'll tell a victory story. I definitely haven't done it perfectly, but I'll give you one example. I try from the very beginning to establish a community where students know that the expectation is that they are kind to one another. And in civics, we talk about a lot of controversial topics, and they can get really heated. And so from the very beginning, I tell people, in this classroom, we treat each other with respect. In this classroom, we are kind. And in this classroom, you can attack ideas, but you cannot attack people. And so, and I just try to make sure that when someone's talking, that I'm actively listening to them and engaged in what they're saying, and that I model that behavior for my students. And recently, I have this really shy student, and we were doing a debate, and her job was to be the reporter. She had to read out questions that she had already composed in advance. And she got really, really nervous. And you can tell when your students are trying to get out of work and when they are actually petrified to speak in front of their peers. And she was like shaking and her voice was breaking. And so I walked over and I said, hey, do you want your group member to read this for you? Because I know you did the work. You're going to get a good grade, but do you want, Jacob to read it for you? And she said, yes. And so he read it out, the questions. And then eventually, after a few minutes, she stood up and actually took her Chromebook back and started reading questions, and which I thought was incredibly brave. And she started to get nervous again. And she said, I'm sorry. That was a dumb question. And before I could even jump in, all of my other students, I had at least 3 say, no, that's not a dumb question. That's actually a really good question. We want to hear it. And you could just see when her peers jumped in and were kind to her, it just instantly built up her confidence. She was so empowered, and she has been a different student since. And so I just think it's really important that kind of what it says on the slide, when a student asks a question indicating that they are lost or just plain wrong, high levels of peer-to-peer relationships mean that the student is not ridiculed, does not feel that they should be silent or bear their not knowing alone, that they can depend on the teacher and other students to help them out. And that starts with you modeling kindness and you being patient with your student. And last thing about this topic is that teachers' dislike for students is rarely secret to their classmates. Students are observing every day. They're observing you closely, and they're very good at reading your body language and your expressions. Sadly, students who are disliked by their teachers are more readily rejected by their peers than those who are liked by the teacher. In a study of 1,400 fifth graders, the students reported that they also did not like the children that the teachers had told researchers they did not like. Targeted students were held in negative regard 6 months later, even when they were in a new grade level with a different teacher. So when you make it clear that you don't like a student, that impacts their learning, not just while they're in your class, but for 6 months after they leave. And so it's so important that we hide our emotions as teachers, and that we are introspective, that we confront those emotions, and that we try to deal with them, and that at the very least, we at least hide it from our students if we're not fond of a particular student. So, setting high academic expectations. This is from the book Teaching Like a Champion, another great read that I encourage you to check out if you haven't before. So technique 1 is no opt-out. So this is something that's really hard at the beginning because it's uncomfortable, but I encourage you to challenge yourself to do it. Teachers with high expectations don't accept I don't know, but expect students to be engaged and give it a shot. And so this is really challenging, because students, it's hard when you can tell, like, I don't think he knows the answer to this question. But the thing is, kids at least know a little bit, right? And so we're going to push them past I don't know and just say, well, tell me a little bit about this part that might get them to answer the question. And then they can, you can use what they've shared and then build on it with another student. And so it's not that you're trying to embarrass them or make them feel dumb. It's that you are not going to accept I don't know as a way to get out of answering a question. And honestly, it builds trust. It shows students that you're not going to let them off the hook, that you care enough about them to push them. And it also, when you celebrate their small victories, when you show them like, hey, that's awesome, like what you said is right, it's on the right track, and kind of build on their answer, that just boosts their confidence so much. Technique 2, right is right. So this is the second part to no opt-out, is that, and I'm really guilty of this, but no half answers. We don't accept half right, that you're not just trying to boost their kind of their ego or make them feel good, that you ask for a complete and correct answer, and that you push them with the help of their classmates, with your help, to get the right answer. And so, and this is another way just to show that you really, you care. Technique 3, this is kind of stretching it, is about maybe moving from what questions to higher order thinking questions, that you are pushing, you're pushing your high level students, and even, all students, to stretch their answer, to add depth and nuance to their answers, and to improve and grow. And so that a base level answer would not be sufficient in your classroom, that you want them to excel and that you want them to see them grow. So stretching their answers, asking them to kind of explain why they answered the way they did. Technique 4. So 21 times makes a habit. That's what I came up with to remind you that repetition is one way to be sure that students understand what you expect and that it is done to your standards. And so whether this is behavioral repetition or assignment repetition, or making them kind of do assignments over again until they do it right, but the more that you do something in your classroom, the better they're going to get at it. And so just making sure that you are consistent and that you are kind of drilling it into their head, your expectations on behavior and assignments. All right, last one, building and maintaining high behavioral expectations. And I think as a fairly new teacher myself, I'm in my 4th year of teaching, and I think this is a really hard one. I'm going to be honest. It's tough to be the disciplinarian, but at the end, it's funny. Some of the students that when I'm at the school I'm at, I've been at for 3 years, and so I'm now finally getting to see the seniors who I had as sophomores. They're kind of getting to the end of their high school career, and it's so surprising. The kids that come back and are nice to me, that come back and say hey and pop by my room and wave to me when I'm in the hallway. Actually, some of them are the ones that I had to discipline the hardest. But I think at the end of the day, they knew, because I tried to be fair and consistent and I was kind to them. I think they knew that it was a sign of love, a sign of care, that I was willing to discipline them when they deserved it, when they needed that kind of response. And it shows them that you care enough to do it, do the hard thing of disciplining. So technique 1, I had my mentor tell me this because I had a really challenging 4th period. My first semester at the school I'm at now, I was a 2nd semester teacher, and man, that class was challenging. But she told me, and it has stuck with me, if you're mad, you've waited too long. And I've tried to work on that ever since. And so I just don't let myself get mad. If it's something that I know is gonna make me dislike this student, or it's gonna make me angry, I deal with it right then. I don't let it build. That was my biggest mistake my first year of teaching. I would be like, well, I don't really want to deal with this right now, so I'm just gonna let go. And then sure enough, it would come up again, and then I would be mad, or it would, down the road sometime, it would come up and the kid would do the same thing and it would make me angry. So responding early and proportionately can help you avoid real crisis. So that means, proportionally, that key part, that means that you're not losing your cool if they forget to bring their pencil to class. Like, be reasonable. Now, everybody gets to have their rules, and I understand that, but responding early and proportionately can help you avoid real crisis. And so rather than giving a warning, go ahead and give out the consequences when the behavior is still only a minor problem. Technique 2, realistic rules and 100%. So champion teachers don't create unrealistic behavioral expectations, because their final expectation is that everyone conforms 100% of the time. So this means I found, and this is my personal opinion, but I found having less rules that are I have just a few rules, but they're broad enough to encompass a lot, but specific enough that my students know what I expect from them. So I think if you have like 10, 12, 15 rules, it's going to be really hard for you to keep track of. So you are probably not going to be able to maintain consistency of enforcement of rules. It's going to make discipline really hard, and it's going to be hard for your kids to keep track of. And so fewer rules, try to figure out, in that first semester or two, what are the things that really bother me in my class? What are the things that I just cannot live with? And like for me, sounds kind of silly, but one of my big rules is I don't like when they line up at the door. So I want them to stay seated or stand behind their desk until the bell rings at the end of the day. And this is a rule. I've had so many classes that want to test me at the beginning of the semester, and they will try to storm the door before the bell rings because, they're watching the clock at the end of class. And I make them go back and sit down, and then they can leave. And so making them do it over again is a big thing. So anyways, having a few rules, but trying to make sure that everybody is following them, conforms 100% of the time by the end of the semester. Technique 3, so be clear and specific. So make sure if you are asking for compliance that you have been very explicit in explaining what it is that you want them to do. So having numerically less rules helps with this. I jumped the gun and talked to you guys about this already, but making sure that, if I tell them you are not to have your cell phone out in class, and I try to be very explicit in the first couple of weeks. That I remind them often. That means I don't want to see it, hear it. I don't want it to be in my classroom at all. Leave it in your locker. And so being very explicit with what you expect, because sure enough, if you say, I don't want to see a classroom, I don't want to see a cell phone in my classroom, I bet you're going to hear it. And then they're like, but you said you don't want to see it. Kids are the funniest about that. So making sure that you are clear and specific. Lastly, and I talked about this with the lining up the door, but do it again. So this is perhaps the only technique that works, or a negative consequence that truly works. When a student fails to meet my standard, I make them do it again. And they have to model the appropriate behavior. This is not fun. Kids do not like it, but it really does work long term. And there's a way to do it where you're not being confrontational. You're just like, hey, like that wasn't good enough. I want you to do it again. And they will eventually learn that it's easier just to do it right the first time. All right. So this is where you get to kind of contribute. And I'm really excited about this part. I cannot wait to see what you guys come up with. But I want you to take a few minutes. You're going to participate in this tic-tac-toe assignment. And it's going to allow you to share some of your brilliant ideas, because you guys all have amazing ideas, and I want to learn from them and apply them in my classroom. And I know all of the other teachers in this session want to learn from you. So you're going to share with our group, and then you're going to be able to take home some of the ideas. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what that's going to look like. I gave you a menu board. I hope that this is something I like to use with my classes. They really like it because it gives them a lot of choice. So I want you to start with number 5 once it loads. So I want you to start with number 5 and then make 2 choices other than that to complete. So first you're going to start here. Let's see if I can get it to go up. So you'll make 2 choices. So start here, look at the toolkit. It gives you lots of resources, and then any 2. So if you were to click on, let's say you were to click on the Padlet, then you'll see, and it should allow you to contribute. Sorry, I don't know why our internet's being so slow. So how could teachers use this tool to increase learning outcomes for students? And then I gave an example. So then you would go on here and you can see there's a plus button. You would add your own comment on how you would use this tool in your classroom. So you can kind of explore the tool from the student end, see what they see, and share your ideas for you and for other teachers. Same thing with Flipgrid, and there's all kinds of resources that I've provided for you. So you will do that. So I'd like for you to take some time to do that now, and then I'll go ahead and kind of wrap up this presentation. That way you guys can take your time with the tic-tac-toe. The Beginning Teacher Toolkit, this is actually something that I created for you along with teachers at my school that were willing to share. And so this is the Beginning Teacher Toolkit, and it's some of the lessons we use and some of the things that we felt like would be helpful for you as a beginning teacher, because it is so overwhelming at the beginning, trying to kind of master everything. And so, so we kind of made this for you. Hopefully that's helpful, and you can, I'm going to share this out to you, but you can use all the links and create, make your own copy and create your own lesson. And that's it. That's it. The beautiful thing about learning is that no one can take it away from you. That is my quote to end, and may you continue to have a fun and productive learning session ahead. Enjoy the summit. And here is my address, my email address, and my phone number. Thank you guys.